Hello and welcome to a wintry morning on Gubb Farm. In the springtime this year, I trialled a fishing line fence to see if it would keep out the deer. The problem is, at the other side of the water, there is a National Trust property who have introduced deer, and it turns out deer are very good at swimming, so they comfortably cross this waterway. So over the last few weeks, we have seen a lot of deer activity around the house and around the farm. So what I'm going to do today is go and check on the fishing line fence to see how well it is holding up. So last year when I was planting the trees, I narrowed it down to two approaches to defend the trees. The first was to put up a boundary around the field, a fence, and the second solution was to defend each tree. So with the first solution, the right approach would be to put a 2-meter fence around the boundary of the field. But I wasn't very comfortable with that, because it's quite unsightly. It's probably expensive as well, but first and foremost it was too unsightly, so it just wasn't an option. The second approach was to defend each tree, and you can put 1 or 2 stakes, you can put a cage around the trees, or you can put a plastic collar around the trees. And the problem with that is it was going to cost around £3 to £4 per tree to defend. So if you're planting 2,000 trees, that quickly gets you up to £6,000 to £8,000 of expenditure. So I decided to do some research on the internet, and on YouTube there were a number of people advocating the use of fishing line, specifically £30 monofilament fishing line. And their theory was, because the deer can't see that fishing line, they won't cross it because they'll press up against it, and deer will not jump anything if they're uncertain of their landing. And I have seen that firsthand. I have followed deer across the island, and they will track along the hedge until they can see their landing and then jump across. So I thought that makes some sense, so I will try it. So it only took me a day to set up this fence, so it was very fast, it was very cheap. I used some waste wood I had, and I got 2 or 3 rolls of fishing line, and I put it up around the boundary of 3 fields, Catkins, Woodstock and Big Dog. So I'm going to walk over now to Catkins and have a look to see how well the fence has withstood the presence of deer over the last month, 2 months. So here we have an example of the fishing line that I put up. So this is what it should look like. But unfortunately, this side of it's all broken. Well, as you can see, it doesn't work. So what I've observed is, at one point, deer got over the fence. They tracked along the fence, and I then entered the field, and then they bust through it in an effort to escape. So I think once they got familiar with it, they learned that they can just bust through it. So all around the farm now we have broken fishing line fence. So if you're planning to use fishing line to defend a boundary, from my experience it's been a complete failure. That doesn't mean it won't be useful at defending a garden plot within a field or a larger garden. I think in that scenario the animals have different pathways they can explore and other food choices they can select. But defending a field where there is maybe a kilometre of their pathway blocked, it doesn't work. The problem with the deer getting into the trees is that they walk along and they just nip the heads off them. So in this tree, the deer have nipped all of the branches. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world either, because come February I'm going to be pruning these trees. So It's probably nature's way of pruning trees, and what happens to the tree now is that will stimulate growth. Now excess pruning creates a bushy tree, so the rule of thumb is prune no more than 25% of the tree. So I'm not sure how much was here before, but it's got a good hard prune, I would say. So what I will do in the springtime is I will come back to this tree and the other trees that have been damaged, and I will just snip the tree at a bud, and then that will become the new leader on that branch, and growth will continue on. So it's part of the process of shaping a tree. Not the end of the world, but not ideal either. I would rather have the frost over before I was pruning trees. As I walk around the field inspecting the trees, it looks like most of the damage is along the boundary. As you get into the centre of the field, there are some trees that have been eaten. So I'm going to come back to this in the springtime, and we can see how well these trees are doing at the boundary at the bottom of catkins compared to the trees further in the centre of the field. As I was walking around the field, I saw something that was very exciting. A mushroom! So around the trees I put down wood chip, and my reasoning was to try and develop a fungi-rich environment around each of the trees. So the mushrooms is telling me that that is starting to work. Yes, it's only a small mushroom, but it's an indication that I'm going in the right direction. Another observation walking around the field is I have a number of trees with single stems and no branch growth coming off it. So what I will be doing in a video, probably in February, is discussing how you go about pruning these trees and developing the shape that you want. So the big question now is, how am I going to defend the trees going forward? I have applied for a grant from the Department of Agriculture in Northern Ireland, DAERA, and it's part of their environmental farming scheme. If I am a recipient of that grant, there is a requirement in the scheme to put a stake and a cage around each individual tree. So whatever funds I get from the grant will offset the cost of having to do that. If I don't get the grant, I am just going to put the trees in the ground and leave it to nature. I think that even if I put the trees in a cage, they're quickly going to develop branches outside of the cage, because hazelnut trees are not like ash trees, for example, that develop long leaders and then branch out. So I think whatever way I go, I'm going to have to deal with deer nipping the ends off branches. And I'm not that bothered by it, because all they are doing is replicating the process of pruning that I will go through in February anyway. So over the coming videos, I am going to be establishing a coppicing forest, which in turn will be used to produce wood chip and compost to put around the base of the trees. I'm now going to be starting preparation for planting, and fingers crossed I can get the trees for February. So some interesting videos to look forward to there. So until next time, good luck!